So welcome. This was a nice intermission to start this conversation. So welcome to everyone. Just give me 1 second. I have just to be sure that the sound will not go on. Thank you very much for joining this live tour and conversation with Babak Golkar and Matteo Lucchetti. So first of all, I would like to invite you, and I will present Babak and Matteo in a few seconds. But first of all, I would like to give the context of this live event. It is the third live event we organize from the gallery. Oh, here I am. It is the third event we organize from the gallery, and I'm very happy that you join us. The first time we will indeed share a live tour with the actual exhibition that we have at the gallery and that we had shut down due to the current situation. So the show you will see, we will share with you a virtual tour, but of the real exhibition in 3D. And then during the talk, there will be, during the conversation between Matteo and Babak, there will be of a material we will share with you. And before we got into that, just for the people that are first participating to Zoom, to this kind of event, I invite you to share with us through the chat. There is a little drawing of a chat. And if you can let us know from where you are following us, that would be wonderful. So I'm going to start. So this is an important step. So I am from Madrid, and I'm doing that from Madrid, and I invite you to do the same because you might need during the talk and at the end of the talk this button to send us your questions and comments along the talk. So there will be a moment for question and answers at the end. Nonetheless, please do not hesitate. Hi, Huma. I'm sorry, I cannot stop to say hi to people from London. I invite you to send your conversation, your questions, during the talk, and we might use them during the conversation and for sure at the end of the conversation. So first of all, I would like to first start with the little introduction. I would like to welcome you to this virtual tour by Babak Golkar. Babak, after 3 years of research, I like to say that he's an artist that questions society, capital, the art system itself, and he has been researching on different themes from Bertolt Brecht, from different time of the history, the propaganda of Goebbels, the Tea Party, etc., etc., and he will tell us more with Matteo about it. And this show was really meant as a propaganda. And I'm going to show you, before we start into it, a short video of how the show has been presented. And you will have, it's a show where you need, in fact, to have an experience. And Babak created an amazing experience that we want to share with you. Matteo Lucchetti, that will converse with Babak. He's an art historian, a writer, and his main curatorial interests are deeply aligned with Babak's practice, indeed, because he's interested in artistic practices that redefine the role of art and the artist in the society. Since 2010, Matteo curates with Judith Wielander, and I hope I say it well, Visible. Visible, it's a research project and the first European Biennial Award for socially engaged artistic practices in a global context. It's a project by Fondazione Pistoletto and Fondazione Zegna. And Matteo worked as a curator of exhibition and public programs at BAC in Utrecht from 2017 until 2018. And now I made this introduction, and before we start, as I was telling you, I would like to share with you the video on how we welcomed the visitor for Babak show, and it will be the first excerpt of the of the show. Do you heard the rules? Do you have any doubts? Okay, please come with you. So this is a video recording of, in fact, the opening. And here is the show. I don't know if I should comment. Right now I saw Matteo that is smiling, viewing this. So this is a little walkthrough. So when you were entering the show, you were totally immersed in a fog. The fog was so dense, in fact, that you couldn't really see other people 3 meters away, and you couldn't even see the works. So it was a total disorientational experience. And I know it's difficult to share it that way, but it was, we wanted to share this video. Okay. So here it is. Great, so thank you very much. You've been very patient. Now it's time to officially welcome Babak and Matteo into this presentation, virtual tour of the exhibition. Hi Matteo, hi Babak.
Hi Sabrina, hi Matteo.
Hi Sabrina, hi Babak, hi everybody. Thanks for joining.
Hello. Indeed, thank you.
So thank you very much for joining, and I leave you the ground. Maybe it's maybe the most easy step to step in that conversation is for you, Babak, to tell us about the last video we have seen.
Sure. So thanks everybody for joining us. This is quite interesting and unusual way for me to operate, for everybody to operate. So I appreciate being good sport and joining us. I would say that the fog element was an experiment that I really wanted to do, and it was aligned with the whole project as a whole, which was conceived over 3 years. Since late 2016, I began this project by learning how to paint, because I hadn't painted before. And in terms of the video that we saw, I think that's the video that I recorded actually. And that's my first experience of the exhibition. Prior to that, everything was on Skype. Everything was working perfectly down to the littlest details, but everything was mediated through Skype or FaceTime and devices like that. And this was my first experience. So when I walk beyond the 3 curtains, I was shocked. I wasn't expecting my body to react the way it reacted. Even though it's my work, it's my installation, I'm very familiar with it. I ate and drank and slept with the idea for 3 years. Fog just amplified my visceral experience. And I intentionally didn't go to the gallery prior to that video to feel what the audience would feel. And at that point, I was the audience. So it was incredible. I'm sad that it can't be experienced in real life, but this is the closest we come to it. So we use our imagination and try to embody it as much as we can. Hopefully.
Again, thanks everybody for joining. I see a lot of faces that I know, and that makes me smile as much as the fog makes me smile. Because of course it's interesting to introduce an exhibition by presenting fog. So basically obscuring the vision of what is meant to be a moment of revelation of art. and it's rather a moment of revelation of the perhaps the kind of difficulty that one should experience in approaching art that wants to talk about propaganda, and wants also to engage with the fact that all art can be propaganda. And starting from this statement, which is can feel like a big one, but it's also a moment of revelation, I would say, from which maybe we could start. I'm very happy to do this. Also, I mean, today is 25th of April. I'm Italian, even though I'm in Brussels, so it's Liberation Day. So I wish everybody a good Liberation Day, 25th of April. So everybody against fascism, always. That's my first statement. So thanks, everybody. And perhaps I would like also to say that with Babak, we didn't want to be all the time just showing you our faces. So we thought to just have other short visual intermissions. So we chose 4 images that have nothing to do with the show. But just because the work of Babak exists within a multi-layered reality of cross-references, his work, of course, can appear in this show as a show of paintings and installation, but every image that he decided to paint or he decided to present in the exhibition exists within a space of multiple references. So we decided basically to choose 3 out of 4 have nothing to do with Babak's work, but they still work because there are other artistic efforts that wanted to speak about also the power of propaganda when it comes to the creation of an imagery, let's say. So perhaps we start with the first image, and we take it as a guide to go through this tour of the exhibition. Maybe you want to say something?
I do, yeah, I do actually. So the device is called Fropter, which is an optical or optometrist device to gauge the vision and the ability of seeing. And we were talking about this with Matteo yesterday, and the ongoing conversation that we've had is that I'm actually really interested in different ways of seeing, not different people's or different perspectives offered by different people, but within the same area of vision of the individual. And this is interesting for me because my practice, as Matteo said, attempts to do that. If you trace back any of the work that I've done, I've tried to look at certain things from multiple angles and then pull myself out of it, place myself somewhere else and look at other subjects with different lenses and try to offer those experiences through different media. And I've tried not to stick to sort of parameters that are sometimes imposed on artists or on the creative industry in terms of medium. I've always kind of been fighting, my practice always fights against being pigeonholed in general, but media is something that I escape from essentially. And I try to dab into different media to research and sort of present the results of research. And these are just possibilities. They're not fixed statements, they're experiences. So in terms of the exhibition that we put together in Sabrina's gallery, incredibly supported this very experimental, very bold, in fact, institutional exhibition, I think, embodies all of these experiences, as you could see. So I think with that, we can sort of dive into, as a context. So this device as a context to my practice. And I invite you to keep that in the back of your mind as we talk about how you could sort of switch these lenses as even we talk. So.
And also, I mean, when you chose that image, also you recall this experience that I think is familiar to all of us when we do when we check our site, and then we are, we have this object on us, and the doctor usually tries different lenses. So every time you're able to see different things, and maybe a letter that looked like an N became an M, depending on the kind of lens that is, let's say, in front of your eyes. Mm-hmm. And this is really, for us, was really a starting point to let you think about an artistic methodology. So the idea that the work of Babak tries to exist from the awareness that if when we are, let's say, confronted with an image, especially in an exhibition space, we should try to look at it through many different lenses. So the idea that this methodology that he uses, it's a way in every work to let the work exist in this multiplicity we were mentioning before. So for instance, the first work that we would encounter if we would do a tour of the show would be a series of curtains that are printed with a painting that Babak took from a video from BBC that recorded an event, an historical event of Churchill splashing into a swimming pool, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we are in a mise en abîme of history, of media representation of history. Is that history the fact that Churchill takes a swim? Yes, because he wanted to show certain capacity, certain health capacity. And then, of course, you have like the painting of that event that is then turned into a curtain, so made into an experience again. So there is already like a series of layers that juxtapose one with each other. And the way in which you enter the show, you have to break this image. So you have to make a gesture to break what? What did you want people to break, Babak?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, break the image, in fact, and image as a physical thing, but also as a metaphorical apparatus that is deeply tied into our subject of propaganda. And I'll just add that this is a triptych, 3 frozen moments from this video that Matteo described. What was really intriguing for me is that this is part of a BBC documentary that portrays him in this casual sort of situation. But what's really intriguing is that it is a complete setup. Imagine in the 50s that this video is taken. Cell phones didn't exist, so the apparatus wasn't this small. The video camera must have been quite huge. At least there are probably 2 people standing on top of the ladder of this slide that he's going down. But on top of that, in reinforcing the idea of confidence as the man, he goes down with his head first, like a child, playful child, with his face up. That's a total confidence. And then he hits the water, and ironically, because he's got such a large mass, the force of water pushes his swimsuit out, so he becomes completely naked, which is sort of counterpart to the image of this strong leader. What's also interesting is the text, which is the subtitle from a Danish channel that aired this, that says constantly through this sequence, it says he was the only man who was able to save the free world. So then again, propaganda is completely constructed right there, image and narrative and language.
And interesting, as soon as you break like this kind of media construction of a political message in the form of news, then you are confronted again with a foggy situation where you don't get to see anything, but you need to find your way through the works. Mm-hmm. And again, you need to use a sort of distancing, sorry to use the word in these days, in between you and the works, and trying every time to find the right balance in between what you're actually seeing and what, the image or the way the image was constructed wants you to see. So what is like also the agency of the image that has been constructed for you to see it in
exactly. and also the way we installed it back to back, it doesn't allow you to see the picture as a whole, even the sequence. You don't have enough quote unquote distance after the first image. You're just sort of going with the experience all of a sudden. It's until you kind of step back, as we are right now, and looking back at it and dissecting it, that we realize what the audience would go through. Yeah, sorry.
No. Just continuing with the tour, so that we also comply to the idea that we are taking people through the exhibition. The second work that we would see is this work depicting. Here you have a non-foggy version of the exhibition.
The unfogged exhibition, yeah.
And the second work you would see is let's say a depiction that you painted of from a photograph of a merry-go-round, where from distance it looks like a merry-go-round or a wheel. What do you call it? Like a panoramic wheel. A panoramic wheel, where at first it looks just like that, but then if you get closer, you see who's on the chairs of this panoramic wheel, and you realize that it's full of Ku Klux Klan members. And this is a real photograph that exists and that documents this event. And also the frame itself, also that might look like a 19th century impressionist painting frame, also carries some elements that make reference to the event. You want to tell us more about this work?
Yes, it's. I love how this 3D is disorienting. It's perfect. I love it. So yeah, I came across this photograph, which was at the time that I saw it, I couldn't believe it. But then when I started thinking about it, it was like, okay, this is, this. Of course, this exists. And even though it's from 1926, I believe, it's extremely contemporary, I believe, minus the fact that the KKK don't have to bother wearing, their costumes anymore. They can wear a suit and a tie and, run certain offices, in fact. But I really wanted it to be working with illusions and the idea of impressionists sort of grabbing just enough information from an image or from a scene to give the impression of something was the goal of this piece. And it's quite muted from a distance. It's a sort of alluring image, which I often use as a sort of a hook for grabbing the audience. And then you come closer and your sort of perception of it gets challenged, it gets broken down, and then that's how I like to get to the mind. Thinking starts at that point when you're at a certain proximity with it. I should add that this is from KKK Amusement Park. They had their own amusement park in Colorado, which was one of the biggest chapters of the KKK in the 20s and well into much later times, into 60s and 70s. And I really thought that this is the only piece that I framed, and I'm not a painter. I, don't usually engage that much with painting, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, but frame is something that I always look at. And I really needed to work with the frame as an apparatus. So in this case, I hired an artist friend of mine here in town, Jonathan Syme, who kindly spent time and built it from scratch. This is a traditional frame that was built from scratch. And my model was a colonial, sort of traditional French frame, with the addition of these two the ropes that go around the colonial frame. I just wanted to tie two nooses at the end. So again, a lot of people that go through this exhibition, they see the picture, they see the frame, they do come close to the painting and realize it's KKK, but the frame is a little bit trickier to get to these two nooses.
And I think it's important to say, because we're going to repeat this word a lot, that propaganda also let's say, normally is understood as something that, of course, has to do with the performance of power, but it's also very much perceived as something that pertains to the 20th century, the totalitarian regimes, as something from the past. But actually, I think it's important to say, and you're not one of the only artists that is working on this. For instance, another artist I worked with a lot, that based a lot on his researches on that, is Jonas Stahl. And the idea that actually propaganda is still like a way that we can define how power performs, and also power understands how art, or let's say images in general, are a way to construct a reality. So to talk about propaganda, I find it extremely relevant today, and is not something, of course, that we can let's say simply put in the closet of what was the 20th century, but it's actually something that is, if we just think of Steve Bannon and the alt-right in general, or we think of Cambridge Analytica and the influences of Russian government towards like the algorithms of and not only, of course, the Russian government influence on the algorithm, but maybe we can get to that. But perhaps one element that, since we're talking about 20th century, maybe we go to the second image. Surprise. Here we are. This must be familiar to many of you, but for those who don't know where the image is from the 1967 Jean-Luc Godard movie La Chinoise, the Chinese. And this scene in particular, I recommend you to watch it even on YouTube. It's a 2 minutes scene, and what you see is one of the four protagonists of the movie explaining to the audience in a very Brechtian way what is theater. And he does that by recalling an event of a student protesting the Chinese government, and the student screaming and being fully covered with his bandage on his face in front of the press, accusing the police to have beaten him up, to have destroyed his face, and then little by little uncovering, removing the bandage, and showing to the press that actually his face was completely fine. And what they had believed to be the reality, like up to a few seconds before, was actually something they were tricked to believe as reality. And then the protagonist that does this scene explains to the audience that this is what theater is about. So this is maybe interesting to bring up, because there's so many elements that have to do with the 20th century, of course, but that are still extremely current today. So one, of course, is the role of theater, or the role of staging reality. And on the other hand, there's also like, and let's say a certain sense of estrangement that is evoked by Godard. That's why I mentioned like this idea of a Brechtian scene. But I think maybe this can lead us to look at the ceramic pieces in the exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to add something about Godard, Babak.
I hadn't seen the film, but the excerpt that you sent to me was quite powerful in terms of the visual aspect of it, and in terms of one way that propaganda kind of can operate. But as you were saying before, I wanted to make a comment about the historicity of propaganda and the relevancy of it to now, is that it just feels like, maybe I'm thinking too much about this right now, but it feels like it's on hyperactive mode, and you just have to kind of consider all elements. So that again, I go back to the apparatus that we showed at the beginning. If you imagine every 10 seconds the optometrist would change that thing, put that on a motor, and you kind of have to just try to have a glimpse of all these bombardments of information and manipulations that are happening, to sift through what's fabricated and what's trying to steer you to think in a different way, and what your ability to think is as a person or as a citizen, in fact. So I'm not sure, did we lose Sabrina? Sabrina? I guess she might be looking for the image.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
I was in fact looking for the ceramic. I was onto the ceramic.
No, just in the virtual tour, if you can go close to it, it would be great. So I'll talk about the ceramic maybe a little bit. So these are nine vessels that I wanted to do as reinforcement of optical illusion. I did work with this painting technique, which you anamorphize an image, you stretch it, skew the image, and you have to be in a particular angle for the image to come together. The historical example is the skull in the painting of the ambassadors. But getting back to these vessels, first of all, they're made in China, in Zhengdezheng, which is the sort of mecca of porcelain in the world, and they have abilities that we can't imagine at the moment. One of the abilities is that instead of glazing ceramics or porcelain, they can fuse metal to it. So these images that we were just looking at, they have silver. That's metal infused with porcelain. It's not a glaze. And the particularity of metal is that it does create a mirror effect, whereas a glaze doesn't. And they are extremely light vessels, which I really like in terms of, again, the illusion that the object gives to the audience as opposed to tactile experience of it. So a lot of times I ask audience to actually pick these up because they think they are empty artillery shells from tanks and they're metal or lead or something like that. But in fact, they're extremely light to the point of shocking. This is the view from in the middle of it. And what I really like about it is what you see when you look at this object. You're looking forward, you're looking at the exhibition that's in front of you, but what's inside the piece or what's in front of you in the piece is a warped image of what's behind you. So it does give you the ability to look at this skewed background, which is essentially history behind you. So that's what I would say about it at this point. And if you want to sort of add to it, Matteo, that would be great.
I think it also plays with the element of illusion, no? In some way. So the idea that you are tricked to believe these are metal shapes, no? So therefore, maybe recalling a whole different art historical tradition, like recalling minimalist forms. Immediately, picking your brains towards a certain direction. But actually, in the moment in which the truth behind the objects is revealed, there's this completely different storytelling that starts to play a part in the show. And of course, it's about the anamorphic vision. It's about also the place where you got the objects to be, where you got them produced. And of course, then the relationship gets closer, let's say, towards also what is in the immediate background, with the Mao images, and of course starts a different kind of storytelling. So again, by just distancing or positioning yourself in a different, let's say, conceptual space, historical space, narrative space, then another understanding of what you are in front of unfolds. and therefore revealing also. And also, I think going back to or let's say continuing also conversation around propaganda, I find it also interesting to see how the exhibition also tries to make you look at what is supposed to be understood as neutral art. So art that doesn't have a positioning, as art that doesn't have anything to do with propaganda, which is, of course, something that is, I mean, in my opinion, but I guess also in your opinion, completely false. In a sense that also neutrality has been used as a sort of propaganda of a capitalist democracy, for instance. As we know, abstract expressionist art has been used by CIA to promote a certain idea of freedom that was broadcasted from the US towards the rest of the world in the Second World War, after the Second World War. So, for instance, I find interesting that to keep the audience and to keep the discourse inside the space of propaganda within a gallery show, a very brave one for sure, a very challenging one for the context, but at the same time, a place where potentially you can see all these pieces as neutral. It also plays with the fact that every time you unfold the multiple narratives that are layered inside the piece, you also start to understand how something that might have looked like neutral have very little to be neutral about.
I would say, I mean, if I'm comfortable with the term illusion, it is an illusion. If one would claim that the space and context and the artwork themselves in general don't have position, it's another illusion, I think. And that kind of illusion does in fact tie back into what you're saying with propaganda. And so, I mean, the issue with propaganda is that it's extremely sophisticated and it's very believable, and it doesn't always directly hit you in the conscious. It's in fact most successful when it hits the unconscious. So it's really a lot of work to a lot of times to kind of go through it and tap into the unconscious and see if if it's true or not. And I think this exhibition was one of those ways for me to tap into the unconscious and bring it forward via uncanny, via the notion of uncanny, because as soon as you get in, I had certain expectations of the space that I was familiar with. I'd seen Sabrina's space before, and the idea of walking in it and not recognizing it, or vice versa, something that's presented as new and it recalls something old, which is in my unconscious. So that was quite successful for me as an audience, as a person who created the works and put the setup together with the gallery.
And also, maybe it's interesting to say that this was the second part of the show, that I was happy to collaborate on the first part by writing a first text for the first part of the show that was that opened in October and at the other venue of the Sabrina Amrani. And there was a more explicit reference to a Man ist Man, a play by Bertolt Brecht, with a quite dominant presence of an elephant. So perhaps we show image 3, so that we also have a visual reference.
So I'll give a context to this image that's coming up. So this is from 1931 reconstruction of his 1924 play Man ist Man, which is one of his first plays, and the story is quite fascinating. It deals with multi layers of colonialism and propaganda, and what was after that dubbed as brainwashing. So it's about brainwashing a very dumb guy who turns out to be a perfect soldier. But as you can see on the left corner, there's a really crude sculpture of an elephant that was always in the corner, not too present. But every once in a while, he would move, or she would move. She, in fact, would move, just the limb or the head, or just just shake himself or herself. And Brecht really used these moments to bring back the audience into a reality of theater. It remind them that they're looking at theater. So what I wanted to do was to use elephant as a trope to get into quite a few different discussions. And one of the pieces that we did was, again, back to this city in China. We commissioned the same people to make a sort of I don't know what you would describe it as, like almost like a piggy bank size, maybe a little bit larger, porcelain elephant that had different limbs based on Rumi's parable of Elephant in the Dark, where maybe I'll just touch on this story because I think it's quite relevant.
Maybe if there is also an image, I'm not sure, because this is out of the 3D tour, but maybe if there's an image of the elephant, maybe we can show.
If they can pull it up, that's fine. It's available on Sabrina's website and my website. But basically, the story is that there are 5 blind men living in a village in India, and they hear that an elephant is going through their city, so they want to go experience it, as they've never seen an elephant, quote unquote. And they assign each person to each part of the elephant because they hear it's such a big animal, so they can get a better sense of it, and then they come back and put those sort of experiences together to construct it as a whole. And basically, at the end of the story, their lifelong friendship just falls apart because they cannot agree as to what elephant is. So the person who touched the trunk of the elephant thinks it's a species of a snake, whereas the person who touched the body, for example, thinks it's a wall, like a brick wall, because it was so rough and so sort of a vast area. And the person who touched the legs was convinced that it was a tree. So the moral of it would be that, this is the piece. And the moral of it would be that the construction of truth is extremely subjective, and through the lens, as we're experiencing nowadays. I mean, the idea of tunnel vision has been brought up since the election, 2016 election in the States, and prior to that. I mean, we've been, the fact that television is a tunnel vision itself has been around for how many decades, and it's been doing that for us, constructing our truth. So this was sort of one of the pieces, and then there were 31 paintings of a single elephant that I painted for every day of December of 2017. But I'm not sure if we should get into.
Now you're doing another tour of another exhibition.
Another virtual tour.
It's typical, I mean, of the artist that gets a tour and then it takes people to another tour.
Another tour.
But I find interesting, I mean, just to briefly touch upon this, I mean, not only because that was the elephant in the room, the pun is intended, of course,
yes,
but also because it introduces the idea of perception, you know, and that's also like one thing that can be found also in the previous piece. Some of the previous pieces is also this idea of how you mentioned, for instance, the 30s, no, with a picture from the staging of Man ist Mann by Brecht. And of course, these are the same time where a certain, the Gestalt psychology theory has been in some way, shaped. And this is interesting because it's actually a time when, propaganda appears in all its power, and at the same time, it's also a moment where form is put under scrutiny, and it's understood how our perception functions through certain rules. So, for instance, the idea of pregnancy of a form over another, and therefore how and this parable of the Rumi parable is also interesting in that regard, and also makes us remind us of how we are the first one that trick ourselves when we perceive a certain reality through the things we know. and not necessarily through. And therefore, our quest to the shaping of reality, or let's say the shaping of truth, is a quest that goes through the perception of oneself, and through how we are constructing a reality that is always about compromising our knowledge with other forms, with other knowledge that is exposed before our eyes. Maybe we can, before we show the last image, we can have a look in the tour to the wallpaper with Mao, and also the piece that most directly responds to this reference of Bertolt Brecht, Man ist Mann, that of course for you was also an attempt to think about brainwashing on one hand, but also to think about this idea of estrangement, this idea that the Brechtian theater, more at large, beyond this one piece, and is also why the reason why you are smoking throughout this talk. So, like taking the Bertolt Brecht suggestion of always being busy with yourself while you're exposed to an art piece, so that you can keep a critical distance, and you avoid the problem of identification, and this would lead us to the role of emotions. But maybe this is the last thing we're going to touch upon. So let's have a look to this wallpaper. Do you want to tell us a bit more?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll just step back a little bit and talk about medium for a bit, because the wallpaper is a very particular medium. The painting itself that is constructed from is sitting on top of the wallpaper. You can see it on the left-hand corner. And a lot of these are strategies that I use because of the preconceived notions of the medium. So again, from the get-go, I didn't want to produce a painting exhibition. I never set out to be a painter. And you can see examples of it. While fog has nothing to do directly with painting, it has everything to do with painting for me. While the curtain in the exhibition space doesn't have anything to do with painting, it has everything to do with it. Same with the curtain that we walk in, same with the wallpaper. The image is, again, a BBC archive image of Chairman Mao swimming in the river. And this is a time of turmoil for him, because his popularity was down. They were questioning his health quite a bit. And he was a notorious swimmer. In fact, there's a lasting cultural effect of him being promoting swimming for all citizens of China. And so I found it really incredible that after BBC basically put this out, publicized it, his popularity shot up, but then controversy started to happen that it wasn't him, because he had so many double bodies. They thought he set one of them up to go and do this because he wasn't actually very healthy at the moment. And I really like the image itself, because I'm a really shitty painter. They look like they're just four heads, like severed heads, floating in no perspective. And I like the idea of not having perspective in a painting. It kind of goes back to Persian miniature for me. And
can we say that perspective, I mean, I don't want to generalize it too much, but perspective is also like another form of propaganda in a way. And the idea of organizing space through orthogonality is a certain maybe unconscious attempt of colonizing space through a certain Western tradition. And this could take us to talk about also the plans of settlers, villages through acts of colonization in the African context and beyond. But just because we mention here and there like colonial as a topic, so maybe it's important also to reconnect dots here and there.
Absolutely. absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Matteo.
No, just for moderating purposes, because of course I'm here just to have a conversation with you, but on the other hand, I also feel obliged to all the people that are here. And I don't know, Sabrina, what do you think? Shall we go for the fourth image and finish the tour, or shall we open for questions? Because we've been talking quite a lot, so I don't know if what Sabrina thinks. Okay, that
Obey.
Microphone. That's why. But yes, no, I think it's a very nice image to share it. I mean, and I'm very curious also to listen to you about this image and why you selected it with Babak.
Okay, so we finish the tour and then we open for questions. So we try to make it short. But this, again, another quite known image is John Carpenter. They Live, a film done in '88. I find it interesting because both films, this one is done in '88, so before a quite fundamental year like '89, and the one of Godard was done in '67 before '68. So in some ways also interesting to see how cinema has been also prefiguring historical events in a certain form. And this is simply I don't want to talk about the movie. It's could be long, but it's very simple. Basically, there's one character that realizes that the world is living in when he puts a special kind of sunglasses. He understands that all the images that are composing the urban space, or rather here it's more like also the media space of advertisement and not only, are actually a very clear message of consumption. So it's or orders that. So basically, behind every image, there's a very clear attempt of manipulation of the people. So the movie is great, and it's been, I think, became a cult movie like many years later. But it also introduces how the space of propaganda is not a space that you can associate it just with a space for art, but it's definitely the space that we live every day. It's a space that make us induces us in our behaviors as consumers, and I think this is a very special moment. We are all going, of course, through very tough times with different degrees of privilege. But at the same time, it's also a time where we have more time. Sorry for this play with words, but we have more time to really stop and think where we've been, which kind of world we've been living in, and also how art can definitely become a space where we can rethink certain paradigms through which we've been living. So, for instance, the reason why we chose this image is because it really shows how all the work that Babak is doing exists also in relationship to an awareness about a mediascape. So a landscape that the media produce, and of course this brings us maybe to the very last one of the very last piece. There could be others, but there's this piece that is this anamorphic portrait of Goebbels. That maybe it's not so much about Goebbels, but it's more about something more current than Goebbels.
Yeah, in fact, I can sort of contribute to that. The reason for painting Goebbels, which was, I had doubts about painting this picture because of dangers of it being misunderstood or misread, but I thought the grounding for it is strong enough that if the illusion is strong enough, I can justify it, and I think to a certain degree it succeeded. It was not meant to be a direct reference to him. In fact, the piece is called Cellars, and it directly deals with how 20th century propaganda operated, and how it kind of got leaked, and how Goebbels, via Freud, in fact, and later on via Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays, who was a notorious ad man in New York, sort of leaked into someone like Steve Bannon. I actually wanted to deal with Steve Bannon more than anybody else. And I thought, instead of putting him as a subject to be viewed at and historicizing it, I would actually go to his grandfather, essentially, or his father, which I would consider Goebbels being that.